Is that, yeah?
No, August.
It was August 1st. Oh, I'll make sure that's changed.
August 1970.
And remember, you had my move-in date, but that move-in date was when my Section 8 came about. We moved in before that.
Yeah. When did you move in? In 1970 as well?
I believe it was 70. It might have
Because
been.
right now it's 73.
That's when our Section 8
Oh,
went through.
well, I'll have to let Jeff know. Because I was sending out anniversary letters today to people, and
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I moved in August of 1970.
I'll let him know.
Yeah, your apartment wasn't even finished yet.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that you should talk about too.
Hi. Welcome. Thank you.
Hi, Megan.
Hi. So we're gathered here today to talk a little bit about Northgate housing, and you're living here, and maybe we could just introduce ourselves. If you want to go ahead and start,
Sure.
and start that way. Yeah.
I'm Carol Jaramello, and I'm a resident at Northgate. I've lived here for 25 years. I came after the rehabilitation, so I'm not a resident that experienced what it was like to live here before Maloney Properties. But a couple of years ago, I became a staff member here, so I'm also the community builder and support staff to our board of directors like Kathy and Linda.
Kathy.
And I moved here in August of 1970. And I've been here on this board for 30 plus years. And I've been involved in a lot of committees. And I've been the president for a while. And I got to know most of the residents here since I've been here for a long time. And I've known Linda for years. And we've been friends for years. And also know Carol for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Linda Romeo. I have lived at Northgate for over 40 years, 40 plus. Been on different activities, committees. I've been on the board in the past, and I've just rejoined the board. I enjoy my community. This is my home. This is, I raised my children here, and my daughter had her children while she lived here. So it's a great place to live.
It is.
Linda and Kathy. So Northgate, the way that I understand it, was built in 1968.
The old side. The old side.
The old
Well,
side,
yeah.
The Fairfield side.
Fairfield side, yeah.
Yes, I lived in the Greenfield side.
Okay. And so when did you move in?
August of 1970.
1970. So shortly after it was built.
Yes.
And where did you move from?
I moved from downtown on Johnson Street.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was been from the Burlington Housing Authority. And I came down to visit a friend that lived at Northgate. And at 75 Northgate, that used to be the rental office. And I filled out an application there, and I got in probably about months after.
And what was the difference between Johnson Street and Northgate?
Johnson Street was okay. Everything, it was just close to the street. And my grandson, my son went over to the post office one day, and I couldn't find him. And I said, I got to get out from downtown. And that's what happened. And I came to Northgate.
And what was it like then?
I didn't mind living downtown. It was just too close, and some of the people that was around there. I didn't really want the kids growing up there.
Did it feel far away from the rest of the city, all the way out here in Northgate?
I liked it because in North Carolina, where I grew up at, it was mostly an urban area, and I liked that much better.
So who was living here in 1970 when you moved in?
When I moved in, I hardly knew anyone on the side that I'm on the Greenfield side. And then I met another family that moved in. And then a lot of the people that had already moved in, they was working at the hospital. And they worked at IBM and places like that.
Did people take buses? They had cars? How were people getting?
I took the bus.
Yeah,
And I like taking the bus because I got to meet a lot of people.
yeah. When did you meet Linda?
I met Teresa McGargan first.
Okay.
I met Teresa a couple of years after I moved in. And I met Marion Lambert probably 2 years after I moved in. And I didn't meet Linda until later.
How did you meet? How did you get to know one another?
Well, Marion, we used to come out on the porch and talk. And Connie Plouffe, another resident, I met her and her children. And we used to come out and talk, sit on the porch. And I was working at the time. And I was working at UVM. And then I went to nursing school in Brattleboro. And on the weekends, I would come home to Burlington. And I still got to meet the rest of the people, the residents.
Linda, do you remember?
I think we met when we were having issues and we started meeting over here at the hall. I believe that's when we first kind of got to know one another. Was before when we were having problems with management. And,
Oh, yes.
And we decided that we were going to do something about it. And I think Anne Marie Dennis had a lot to bring us all together.
Yeah, because we used to meet all the time because in the winter, our doors were frozen. We couldn't open the doors. And the doors were frozen shut.
We used to shovel snow from in between those doors that would come into the kitchens.
Right.
We had some problems, and when we would raise them to management, we didn't seem to.
They didn't do anything about it.
So talk a little bit about that, Linda. When did you start living out here?
I believe it was in '71. I'm not exactly sure. It was spring of '71. We owned a home over on Shore Road, and due to illness, we unfortunately lost our home. And this was our choice, and I'm so glad this is the choice that we made, because like I said, it is a community, and now that we are growing and things are becoming more, settled, it was an experience, because it was almost as though we built the place. It was, we came through a lot of trial and error and a lot of good support. And this was just the best place, and it is today. I don't think I could. I have been looking at other places because my children now live out of state. I couldn't afford to live out of state and be as comfortable, and as these buildings are so well kept. Management is so good to us. A lot of things going on in this community. We've really brought it up through the ranks, more or less.
What do you mean when you say you feel like you built this place?
Well, it's because we had such a, well, I don't want to say horrible beginning there, but we've been through a lot of trials. We've had to more or less one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, and we fought. We did, didn't we, Kathy?
Yes,
I mean,
we did.
We really had to be aware and make people aware of what was going on out here. I think that was one of the most important things.
Well, you were building community.
Right, and we were also getting a bad rap from neighbors, surrounding areas. Oh, you don't want to live out there. That place is terrible. It's, you know, and it started to show. But because we were determined, we weren't going to lose our homes, we did something about it.
Well,
You
Franklin's,
want to just like see if we can shut the door to that other space?
I think it is.
Oh, you do.
Yeah.
But let
You
me.
just have to unhook it.
You want me to?
Yep, got it.
Okay.
and you know, Franklin Square.
Yeah.
I don't think they get.
I think that they did close the 2 doors.
They did close it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
pretty neat.
It's really loud.
It's closed.
It is close. Okay. Well, I don't think it's horrible.
No, and I knew that they were going to be in there tonight. They play a lot of ball hockey.
play too much
I mean,
ball in there.
I know, and it's getting warmer, and I have suggested, but it's not my program to take them outside. What?
Well, we'll just we'll soldier on, and I think.
I mean, and you can't really calm them down because
Yeah.
once they get started.
Right, forget it.
Right.
yeah. We're right next to the community room, so we're hearing all that nice children's noise. 1971. So tell me a little bit about who's telling you not to live here. You lived on Shore Road. That's nearby.
Yes.
So tell me, like, who's saying? Who's?
It was just, you know, homeowners that lived out this way. I mean, we did get, you know, a bad rap because the buildings were becoming dilapidated. They would hear of our concerns and not getting, you know, things done. They would hear about our electric bills. We used to have electric heat here, okay? And our heating bills were more than our rents. And it was just getting to the point where something had to be done. And as a group of people concerned, we just took that step forward.
I think unfortunately, Northgate fell into the category of, I don't know if you've ever heard of Father Panic Village in Connecticut, in Hartford, Connecticut. It's Bridgeport, Connecticut. In Bridgeport. And it basically fell apart. The owners here planned to pay off their loans early. They had probably an interest rate of 1.5%. And so they were reaping all the benefits of all the tax credits that they could get, low interest rate, but they weren't keeping the place up. And unfortunately, when a community does not have pride in itself and doesn't have the upkeep, you do get crime and you do get drugs. And unfortunately, that did happen to Northgate when its residents did not own it. And so the bad rap that Linda's talking about is homeowners basically, and I hate to say this, but it was more of a classist type of statement. You know, you don't want to go to Northgate, you know, you can buy your drugs there, and everybody lives on welfare, nobody works, which is not true. It's just not true.
And it also pulled people in that were looking for those situations, brought them to our area.
Sure.
So we also had that happening.
But these were your neighbors. This is your house, your home. You're living here in 1971. And when did it really start to feel like? When did it really feel like it needed to change? Like, when did you start organizing together?
I think it was the mid 80s from
early to mid-80s,
research
yeah.
that I've done. From what I understand, Kathy, you actually, you and Anne Marie Dennis kind of spearheaded a lot of it by bringing lawsuits against Fairfield Associates. The plumbing was horrible. People were getting sewage in their bathtubs and their washing machines.
Yes.
3 lawsuits brought, 3 lawsuits won.
So did you, Kathy, you were involved in those lawsuits?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
We had sewage back up in our washers, in our bathtubs. And so I got sick of the bull. And so I talked to Gretchen Bailey, which is an attorney, and I talked to Jim Dunn from Vermont Legal Aid. He was working there at that time. And he came out to see me. And then we talked. And then he went to see the management here. And then after that, I'm trying to think of the lady's name that used to work here. She was terrible. And then whenever I know she filed a lawsuit against me and a few other people. And I said, I'm not moving, because this place.
She tried to evict you.
Yes, she did. And I said, I'm not moving. I said, I will fight it. And I did.
And that was with the help of Jim Dunn.
Jim Dunn and Gretchen Bailey.
Yeah. And what, did you go to court?
We didn't go to court. Jim Dunn and Gretchen Bailey handled everything.
Yeah.
And so I didn't end up going to court at all.
No.
And I guess they must to fix most of the things. And after they tried to evict us, I didn't move, but a lot of people did move out because they said they couldn't afford to go to court.
Mm. It was intimidating. It was. It was.
Did you get an eviction notice, Linda?
Several different times, but what would happen in my apartment, I always had the sewer opening in my apartment, and not only would I get the sewer backed up into my washer, into, you know, my tub and my sink, the pipes would just blow up and it would pour out onto the floor, and it was never cleaned up. They would never come over and take care of it. So it was up to me to take care of this raw sewage in my basement.
So was it just poorly built? Was Northgate poorly built from the beginning?
I think that they were just kind of...
I think it's because of the weather, because they made these doors, you know, they had those sliding glass doors, and I think that's why it was like that. I think there was more for summer places instead of winter places.
We weren't insulated because the cabinet on the outer walls, our food would freeze right in the cabinet. You know, cans of vegetables, whatever, would be frozen solid.
So you just get up in the morning and...
And if it had been snowing out, it had been windy, the snow would blow inside of between the two doors. And actually, I mean, you would get a pile of snow on the kitchen floor that would be anywhere from 6 inches to 8 inches high. And we couldn't even lock the slider doors. Do you remember, Kathy? We used to have to put sticks in to keep the doors closed.
But something made you stay. Something made you stay here. What was it?
Well, at that time it was affordable.
Yes.
And I was just glad to get out from the city. And I figured one day it would be a nice place to live.
Faith.
We've come a long way.
Linda, how about you? What made you stay here?
Well, I had a young family. And we really, after losing the house and, you know, paying that off, we did have to go on assistance, and that wasn't easy. We had to think of our children. We were close to the schools. We were on a bus line. We didn't have a car. So this was, and like I said, it continues to be my home. And I think we tend to fight for what we really want. I mean, I think that's the way we're built. And I think we all realize that one day it would be our home. It might have been a long fight, but we did it.
Tell me about Anne Marie Dennis. She comes up a lot in paperwork. There's an award for her, the Anne Marie Dennis Award. Who was Anne Marie Dennis, and when did you meet her?
I've known Anne Marie for a long time, because her sons went to school with my children. And I guess she was having a lot of problems too, because she did construction work, And I guess she didn't like what was going on either with the apartments and the coal and whatever. And so I guess she got together with CVOO people like Eileen Lash and those people. And then they started trying to fix Northgate.
It was the heating bills too that
Yeah, the heating bills.
that had a lot to do with.
$400 a month for a light bill.
I can remember
electric heat.
I can remember one that was over 500 in a winter. And when your rent is way below that, do you stay warm? What do you do?
You freeze.
Yeah, that was, it seems like in about 86, Burlington Electric Department was going to come in and weatherize. Do you remember that?
And I think that what they found out when they did come out here, that there was no insulation between the siding of these buildings. And I mean, just the way they were constructed, they just, I don't want to say they were slapped together, but it seems as though they were so rushed to get them up.
I remember some documentation and doing the research for the timeline where Burlington Electric said, we can't do this because of the construction. So much has to be done in order to even get things insulated. And there was a back and forth between management and Burlington Electric.
And the Fairfield side, which was built first,
Right.
okay, they took a little bit more time with it, but when they realized how good it was and how much the housing was needed, I think that they did slap the other side together, because the Greenfield side is a little less put together, shall we say, than the Fairfield side was. We did find that out, but you know.
Interesting. Well, and since the old days, Northgate has had several rehabs, and we're one of the most efficient sites in the nation. There was actually, after our first rehab, there was an article written by some type of construction, and they used Northgate as an example. Yeah.
I mean, I remember going from that $500, okay, but there's been years in between, that $500+ heating to now I pay $44 a month.
Right, big difference.
Yeah.
We're weatherized now, but we have installed gas heat, but the units are good. I mean,
The units are beautiful.
we spend time and we put the money where it should be so that the house, the buildings are going to stay.
Well, I think too, one of the reasons that they were quote unquote slapped together is because the whole plan was to make this into a luxury golf course
Right.
and condos.
Right.
So they probably would have just bulldozed a bunch of them.
Well, that's the word that we heard when we first got word that they were
Right.
going to sell the units and they were going to make townhouses or condominiums out of them.
How
So,
about that? When did you hear?
oh, I don't remember. Do you remember when? Was that the early 80s?
I think it was the early 80s when
Early 80s,
they
I
talked
believe.
about
I mean, that was
making
frightening.
condos.
So they were planning.
We
it for
were
a while.
worried it was going to turn out to be like it was in the Essex. And I think Carol can, attest to that, how frightening that is, because that had just happened. And all of a sudden we were faced with this, well, you either buy your unit or here, we'll give you your suitcase
Displaced,
and,
yes.
move. And you, the people over there, I guess, didn't get much notice, did they? Just...
Do you want to talk about that? a little
Sure,
bit?
I can talk about that. And I'm not really clear on the exact dates, but it was in the mid 80s. I lived at Indian Brook in Essex Junction, and it was a really cute apartment. It was my first apartment that I had on my own. I think I was something like 24, 25 years old. And it was really, really nice. And I remember the management gathering all of the residents that they could. I guess we got notices of some sort stuffed in our doors. We gathered by this little man-made pond out back, and they said that they were going to be selling the property. And residents could certainly buy them if they wished. They hoped everybody would, but they were going to turn them into condos. And at that time, it didn't affect me. I was young enough so that I just went back to an old roommate and became was in a roommate type of situation again. But I do remember a family who had something like 4 or 5 children, and they were desperate. They just didn't know what they were going to do, what they could afford for 2 adults and 4 or 5 children. And unfortunately, I left and got other housing. It wasn't a big deal for me, but a lot of the people were displaced, and I don't know where they went. They may have left state. Maybe some of them came here. Some of them went to BHA, but some people were very frantic to lose your housing, to lose the place where a child was raised. I don't care whether you have a mortgage or whether you rent. If you've grown up in a place, it's your home. And so it must have been traumatizing for those larger families.
And that's exactly what we felt. Oh my, you're going to put 336 families out. Because there weren't any of us here. Well, maybe there were some that could afford it, but it just wasn't something that...
Sure.
It was very, very frightening.
Well, when my mom was still in Glens Falls, New York, she was in a scenario in which she got to choose, do I buy food or do I pay rent? And it was very difficult for her. So I had her come up to Vermont, and we eventually moved into Northgate as an extended family. And it was really quite wonderful, but she couldn't afford to live on her own. And I thought, you work all your life, and then you're faced with this. It's simply not fair. It's not fair. You pay your dues.
Exactly.
336
units. So Northgate is the biggest, and still is, the biggest, what do we call it, affordable or low-income housing?
It's affordable.
Affordable housing.
We have, our tiers range from some units are subsidized, 163 are subsidized, and then we have tiered rents where you can be low, medium, or market rents. So Northgate truly is a diverse community, not only in heritage, but in socioeconomical terms. And it just makes it a richer community for that.
Can you talk a little bit about current Northgate? Talk a little bit about that, who lives here? And what's the structure? Do people rent? Do people own? How does it work?
Well, Northgate had the option of deciding if they wanted to become like a co-op where people would buy into their apartments. But as Brenda Torpy pointed out in her interview, that would close out a whole section of people where they wouldn't be able to come to Northgate. So the residents at that time, the board decided that it would retain its rental structure. However, it would be resident owned and operated. So currently today, it is a resident owned and operated structure. We have a board of directors that have 9 residents and 4 community directors. So the majority of control is the residents of the board of directors. And the structure, I mentioned that we do have subsidized structure. We have a tiered income structure for residents. it kind of depends on where you fall into the whole income structure. We actually have people that come to Northgate that really, really want to live here, but unfortunately they make too much money. And so that's the way it is. It's an affordable housing structure. We represent something like 22 countries of different heritages, countries of origin, and it's just pretty cool to live here. I always call it a little cross section of the world, because we do have so many people from so many different types of heritages.
It's a stepping stone also for people. I know of lawyers, doctors, very successful people who started here.
Police officers.
As college students.
Yes.
And then they just kept on going, and this was their beginning.
Yes.
And a lot of people have done that, but a lot of us have chosen to stay here.
Yep, the bottom line is Northgate offers safe, affordable, and decent housing. And some people stay because they believe in it. Some people stay because, like my husband and I, we don't want to own anything, because for us, we just don't know enough about the owning structure and how to maintain a structure. And we kind of, we're heading towards retirement, so we don't want that. For other people, it is a good beginner community where they can step up to owning their own house. So we're different things to different people. I couldn't imagine not living near the lake. For me, that's a wonderful thing. So that keeps me here. I raised my son here, and it was a very safe place to raise a child. It's different things for different people. Some people love the community. There are others who they're elderly and they have retired here and they plan on being here until the end. And it's just that kind of community for people where, for some of us, it's family.
It sure is.
Kathy, in the 40 years that you've been here, can you tell me a little bit about who you've met? Tell me about some of the people you've met and spent time with. And
I've met a lot of people here at Northgate, and most of the people I've met, they've been here for a long time. And some of the people I have met, they are not that great. They talk about you behind your back.
Which is the world we live in today.
Right.
So.
And a lot of the people that I have met, they live here in the New North End. And I usually get involved in the boards around Northgate and plus here in Burlington. And that's how I get to meet a lot of people.
I just learned you're on the board of voters.
Yes.
The registration board. So you're very involved in the community.
Yes, I am.
Both here at Northgate.
Yes.
On the resident board, and then in the community at large.
Yes.
Right? Talk a little bit about that, being involved in your community. Why is that important?
I got involved when I started working at UVM in 1979, and I got involved in the staff council there. I was the president for a few years. And I was on the traffic appeals board for the police department at UVM. I attended nursing school in Brattleboro. And I'm on the Green Mountain board for transportation. And I was on the school board. And
You believe in civic engagement.
And how does was that informed by living here at Northgate, or have you always been involved?
I always try to get involved in things. And even when I was at UVM, I got involved in the staff council and things like that. And a lot of the times, I was only the black person on any boards. And it's really hard being on a board if you're the only black person on a board, like I am in CCTA, and a school board. It was something else. And when I got involved in the transportation, they didn't want me on the board for the CCTA. And I talked to Sanders, and he made sure that I got on the board for CCTA. I was on there for 6 years. And then after that board, I decided to take a little break. And then I started back in the community at, what you call it, UVM. And I was on that board for probably about 10 years. And then I was on the CVO board for like 14 years with Bob Kiss. And then I was on some boards here in the New North End. And let's see what else. And I was a foster parent for years and years. And I think that's about it.
So is this part of your family history? Were your parents very involved
Yes.
in the community?
Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned Bernie Sanders. What was his role? What do you remember his relationship was to Northgate, and how did you first get to know him?
I met Bernie when he was at City Hall. And at that time, when I had applied for the CCTA board, it was Frank Major from South Burlington. He didn't think the board was right for me. And so Bernie Sanders said I was right for the board, and so they put me on the board. And after that, I got to know Bernie.
And he got involved. Or during his mayoral tenure, they got involved in helping to what we call save Northgate.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
I really didn't. A lot of the time I was at work when all of this was going on, so I didn't get involved in a lot of that. Anne Marie did most of that, because I worked from 8 to 4:30 every day, and then sometimes at night I would try to come out to meetings and things like that.
Yeah. And how about you, Linda?
Well, I knew Bernie. My husband and Bernie got together when Bernie was running for Senate, because he helped my husband run for city council.
Right.
So he used to come to my house, sit on the floor in the living room, and just talk away. And then, yes, he started to help us. He did a lot to help us. He was not going to let this property go. There was just no way that he was going to see some 336 families be displaced. It would just...
Well, when you think about it, the people who owned this place in the very beginning built it on the backs of the poor. Mm-hmm. They got rich on the backs of the poor. They got a low percentage rate mortgage. And then once they were done with the poor, they were just going to tell them leave. And thank you very much. We'll take it for all of our rich people.
And Bernie said, no way.
Over my dead body, I think.
Over my dead body.
He was quoted as saying. It's a kind of a rotten thing when you think about it for people to do that to working people, to people that are living paycheck to paycheck.
But we had some good people. We had Gus and Peter Clavell.
And Brenda
Bernie
Torby.
and Brenda Torby.
Yeah.
So we had people that really, really were there for us.
And if we hadn't had CETO working, I mean, it probably would have been another part of the government, but CETO was instrumental. And then when Madeline Kunin formed the Housing and Conservation Board. And I believe that we're the only state that has those two things together.
Together, yeah.
Which is a real source of pride for me anyway, because I think Vermont's very forward thinking. We received a huge grant from them that helped us out.
So Linda, were you part of some of that early organizing? You said your husband ran for city council.
He ran for city council. Yeah, and then he was on the board here when it was NGRA.
Right.
And we attended all the meetings. We backed everybody that was fighting for us. We were very involved. Even our kids at that point were, they knew what was going on.
Can you talk a little bit about, Linda, that time, can you talk a little bit about the transition from the NGRA to the NGTA?
Yeah, I
or
think
the other way
Carol
around?
can explain
The other
that.
way around.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but were you on the board back then? Can you just talk about it from what you remember
I
being
was
there?
on before the transition, and I think my husband was on, whether he was
You were
during or
on the Northgate Tennis
Tennis
Association first.
Right.
You-
Thank you, Kathy.
You, Kathy, and John.
Right. My daughter, my husband, and I.
We're all on the Northgate Tenants Association.
Yes.
We were all involved.
Yeah. Talk about that.
And my son
what
was
would you do?
working maintenance.
Did you come to meetings? What happened?
Yeah,
Meetings.
I mean, we would have meetings that would run hours. Mainly with all the complaints and all the problems we were having with management, and then, like we were talking before, Anne-Marie stepped in and kind of gave us some kind of guidance, built people to come behind us. We learned then that we could band together. We could do this. So
You even had a voice before you were owners.
we did. We just decided that there was no way we were going to lose our homes. We were going to stand up and fight.
And so that was the Northgate Tenants Association.
Right.
And then what happened next?
Carol has she's been studying it a lot longer.
I know she's been
My
studying it.
mind
I
is
also
going
just
a
want to
little
know
bit.
it from what you experienced as well.
It's just, I'm getting older and I tend to forget,
Yeah.
But then we went it changed over in GRA, right?
It changed over to NGRA even before the first buyout.
Right.
Yeah. But once you all had that first buyout, then there was a partnership between Northgate Housing Incorporated, Northgate Nonprofit, and Northgate Northgate Residents Association, NGRA. And so there were 3 boards that had to meet monthly and vote separately. So you had 3 boards. If there was business, each board had to vote on the same business item and concur. It was pretty wild until we became Northgate Residents Ownership Corporation, and then there was no partnership anymore. The residents owned it outright.
And that's what we call an NROC.
That's right.
And so Linda and Kathy, you're both on that board now.
Yes.
Why are you on that board? Tell me what you get out of being on that board.
Well, I decided to stay on the board because I have invested a long time in this venture. And I want to keep continuing to represent the people here.
Right.
Because a lot of people, they don't have a voice. They don't want to speak out. And they need to speak out because otherwise people are going to take advantage.
And they do. I think they speak out through us in a way because we're out there, we're talking to our neighbors and encouraging them to come to the meetings. Tell us, voice your, and I'm here for the same reason. This is my community, this is my home, and I'd like to stay involved in it.
Sure.
Do you encourage other residents to get involved in that
Yes.
same way?
Yes. I'm always out there kind of recruiting to come on, come find out what it's all about instead of sitting and thinking,
And complaining.
yeah, but to get the real story. A lot of people that live here now don't know the full story, and this is why this timeline is so important. We need it to be here forever. Let generations know, and it will be here for generations. Let them know that we were here, we fought for this, and please keep it going.
Yeah.
This is your home.
It's important for people to know that it wasn't always this great. It wasn't always this nice. I think Brenda said that we could be like a casualty of our own success.
That's right.
People seem to take the composting, for example. Northgate will be offering curbside composting to the residents at no cost to them. Even supplying the compostable liners that go within the buckets at no cost to them. And we're doing this because we believe it's good for the planet. So that's what we do. We're
going to be leaders. We're going to be leaders because sooner or later it is going to be mandatory. So
yes,
let us show the way. We've come this far. We're going to keep going.
What are some of the benefits to living here now? So if somebody were thinking about coming here and they wanted to live here, what are some of the benefits?
Well, an A+ maintenance department, first of all, 24/7. If you have an emergency, you'll have a maintenance person come and take care of that emergency. If you have something in your apartment that needs to be done and you call in a work order, if you call it in the morning, they're there in the afternoon. If you call it in the afternoon, they're there that next morning. To me, having lived in other places as a renter, and I've always been a renter, that's unheard of. You have also a property management company that understands what resident ownership means. So they get it, they support the residents, they understand that the policies that they're enforcing are policies that the residents have written and want enforced. And for me, the great thing about living here is it's safe, but there is a community. And there's always been a community, even in what I want to say, the bad old days. There was still community. You still had people gathering on your back porches, and you still had the barbecues and Linda, the teen dances that you had. To me, and I've always lived in an apartment setting, so when I came to Vermont, that's what I sought out. I've never lived in a single family house. I like having people around me,
sense of community,
and I love it. I love smelling the dishes that my Bosnian neighbors cook, or my neighbors from the Congo, and they're doing a different dish. It's simply amazing the diversity that we have here, and
we have so many activities for our young people. They're safe. There are programs here for just about everyone.
Yes.
We offer things for adults as well as the children, but we do have a lot of programs, and we're teaching our young people what it is to be a community.
I've often thought about what happens if I'm my last family member living in my apartment. I won't be alone. So many people are cooped up in a house and they're alone and nobody knows how they are. And we not only have community here, but we also have something like SASH that comes into our community and deals with our seniors. That's a wonderful program. But we also have a resident services coordinator who will coordinate services for you. And I was just thinking that I don't have to be one of those people that is alone and is lonely if I happen to be an aging person alone in my apartment.
Right.
You know, there are things that I can go to and people that I can speak to, and there's no reason for me to feel like abandoned and alone.
And I
Yeah.
love the idea I can look out, check on my neighbors.
Yeah.
Because they're right there. And if I'm having a problem or struggling with something, one of my neighbors will come out and go, "Can I give you a hand?"
Yeah.
Because we're right there for one another.
Sure.
We're close. We don't, and that.
And that's
Just
the
means a
general
lot.
thing that happens here. That's
It
that's
is.
more what happens than people that don't want to be involved.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have one sort of last thing to ask you about. I'm not sure if anybody has any thoughts on this, but the pet policy. So I think there was a lot of up and down over the years about pets.
No.
And I think that's really indicative of how a community comes together and they have an issue that's really pretty tense. Were either any of you involved in the pet policy?
My husband was.
Oh, tell me
My
about
husband
it.
was. He was on the beginning of it, and since then it's just come such a long way. I mean, we did have a problem with a lot of over, and at one point we decided that we would grandfather in the dogs that were on property, and then they weren't allowed. Well, now that policy has changed, and it's changed for the better. You're limited, yes, but we don't tell you can't have a pet. We do everything to make sure that your pets are safe, you're secure, that they're not running around on property. We've even had clinics at one point where you could have your animals taken care of. But we do have a policy where you might be limited, but heck, I mean, if you could have 2 indoor cats, you can have your assistant dog, and one cat is that. I'm not sure exactly how it reads now.
You can have up to two cats. You can have caged animals. You can have one assistance animal. It doesn't have to be a dog. It could be an assistance cat if you wanted.
We don't have any
whatever.
piglets yet, but if that comes about.
But the pet policy is what we've used in our resident manual as a case study because it's the oldest and most successful policy that Northgate has. And the pet policy, the pet committee members actually went door to door to every single household to get a survey on who wanted pets and who didn't, because in the old owners, depending on the relationship that you had, you could have a pet or not.
Right. Yes.
Depending on the relationship you had with
Exactly.
The owners, the old owners, the original
Were
owners.
you a favored?
And
or-
actually,
Right.
Donna in the office was just telling me a story, and I don't know if you remember this, but she had a cat way back when that was shot with a bullet. It was shot with a gun.
Yeah.
And so she went out and she got a dog, and because other people had dogs on site. Well, she actually got an eviction notice because she got this dog, and she went to court. And I don't remember quite what the outcome was, but it just was an example of the inequity of what some people could do under the old ownership and what some people couldn't do under the old ownership. Under the new ownership, which is the residents, it's an equitable pet policy. Your pets must be up to date on their shots because of safety. You can have a certain amount of caged animals. You can have a certain, I think, up to a
Size
40-gallon fish
yeah.
tank.
Yeah.
And your service animal, you must have a doctor's note. So Northgate understands that some people do need that companionship animal, and if a doctor's willing to write a note for that, then you can have. I think we have maybe 42 dogs on site that are service animals, actually assistance animals. Excuse me.
I was going to say
So, yeah, but the pet policy works, and it's now actually an ad hoc committee because we've had so little that we've had to manage in the past I'd say
It's been
probably
so
10 years.
successful, we haven't
Yeah.
really had to even
Right.
approach changing it at all.
But that's one of the things about Maloney Properties is that they're so good at what they do, and they're so good at relaying the different policies that it works. People understand. They have it down to a science.
So, if you want to think back, 40 years, if there's a highlight in the 40 years of being at Northgate that you want to share.
How can you highlight just one thing? It's just overwhelming. I mean, it's been like crossing a river or a brook, stepping from one stone to another. Does it get bigger? Does it get smaller? It gets better. And that's about, to me anyway, it's just everything that we do here just makes it so much better and makes those old days, it's okay. We were there. We got through it.
It's been a lot of progress.
You paid your dues.
Right.
It's been a lot of progress. Do you want to say more about that?
When we first started out with the boards, we used to have people to come just to complain, and that got better. And then we had people that used to come to the board just to talk about management and talk about board members, and we stopped all of that. And now the people come here just to do their work for the board and for the residents.
Not as many complaints.
I know.
If there's a better understanding, I think we've just gotten to the point where it's all right. You want to say something, it's all right, say it. We'll work it out. We'll work it through committee, bring it to the board.
I think the board of directors has a very high standard of, I won't say professionalism because no one's paid on it, but there's a very high level of understanding of what the purpose is for being there. It's not there to complain. You're there to do business. And I think that this particular board is very strong. They understand why they're there. They get the big picture. And if say a board, a resident director has an issue, for instance, that they're concerned about within their courtyard or within the community at large, it's brought up. But it's brought up, and either management will take care of it or it will be farmed out to a committee. It's not like a big boulder that someone sits on and says, I'm not leaving until this is taken care of. So it's a very mature board. I guess that's the best description. We get a lot of work done, and I'm very proud to not only live at Northgate, but to work with these people.
So thank you all very much. Is there anything more that you want to add that you think is important?
Well, I'm just glad to be a part of the sport and a part of Northgate.
I get that loud and clear.
Yes.
I hear that, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Yeah. Oh shoot, I wasn't recording.